All right, so this is Jason, the candidate from Volt Party, who kindly came to speak to us today and talk about political participation and his party goals. We're going to ask him some questions about the things which we want to know. Our first question would be, what was the motivation to create the Pan-European Party, and why did you decide to join in? Because it's such a different type of a party, very different from the National Party. So what was the idea behind it?
It all started after the Brexit vote, that a few people decided that instead of just complaining and talking about it and looking on how populism and nationalism is rising, they decided to act. And they did so. It started with just a simple Facebook group and inviting friends and contacts. And now we're with 30,000 volunteers all over Europe. And the idea is that the problems and the challenges we have today, like climate change, like migration, you cannot do alone. So you have to work together. So if you have a European party, you can truly look at that. You can look at the problems from a European perspective instead of a national perspective, and you can work together more. And on top of that, if you have now you have the European political system with the European Parliament. You have national parliaments that are elected in a country, and then they move to Brussels and they work together in European groups, which is not really transparent, because you vote for a party in your country, I vote for a party in my country, and then they negotiate and change things. The idea of Volt and the idea we want with other political parties, not just our own, is that you have European parties and European lists. So you vote on Volt, and Volt Germany is the same as Volt Netherlands and Volt Bulgaria and Volt Greece. They all have the same program, and they all sit together in Parliament, which makes it much easier and more transparent for citizens.
Yes, thank you. Could you briefly describe the party goals?
Yes. First of all, we want to change the European Union. We are very pro-European. We are European, but we think the European Union as it is now is not perfect. There are flaws. It's not democratic enough. It's not transparent enough, and it can't always work efficiently and effectively enough. So we want to change the European Union as it is. Secondly, we want to create Europe as a global economic powerhouse. So we want it to be a global player. You're looking at countries like China and the United States, who are global powers, and if we work individually, the Netherlands can't properly negotiate with China. So we want to have Europe work together as a whole, as a position in the world. And lastly, another major point is that we want a just and sustainable society. So we want to work towards a Europe where everyone has equal rights, where everyone is free to do what he wants, and we're moving towards sustainability. So instead of subsidizing fossil fuels and things like that, we want to move together towards a sustainable Europe.
That is very broad goals, and I know that the time span of a party in the European Parliament is not that long. How do you plan to achieve all those broad goals in such little time span?
They are broad goals, and they are not short-term goals. So some things you can do, of course, within a short time frame, but most goals you cannot do. I mean, we're not expecting to be elected in May and be done in June. It's going to be a really long-term system, and the first 5 years we're not planning to fulfill all our goals within 5 years. That's not realistic, and that's not what we want. A lot of things are really the way we see the future of Europe, the way we want Europe to be and to work, and we work toward those. So it's not a short-term goal, it's really a long-term project that we're all willing, everyone who's participating is willing to accept that this is going to be a long-term project that we're going to work on for a very long time.
One of the interesting points which you have made was that you're going to fix Europe and European Union, and you have as a party the Amsterdam Declaration, which is like kind of your party program and the specific goals which you want to achieve. So I was wondering that one of the points there is that you want all the decisions in the councils to be taken by majority instead of consensus. And I was wondering, how does the party in the European Parliament can influence it? Because we know that sometimes the communication between the councils and the European Parliament is complicated.
Well, of course, the Parliament cannot simply decide, and even if we were in Parliament with a rather large group, we still would need a majority for Parliament to decide something. So we always have to negotiate and work together towards a common goal. And even then, the Council has to agree with it, of course. But if you see at all the powers that Parliament has today, when it started, it didn't have those powers. At first it was symbolic, and it grew in power over the years. And all those powers were given to it by the council. So the fact that the council has to decide to give up power is not a new thing. Before, everything was decided unanimously, and now they're doing some things by a qualified majority already. So it's not an impossible thing. We've seen it happen before. And with all things, if we mobilize enough citizens, if we mobilize enough people who agree with this, then the council will not have a chance to not do it. Because the council, in the end, are the governments of the national countries, and if all the people want things to be decided by qualified majority, the governments can't really stop listening.
Yes.
So, and again, this is not, we're not expecting that we will be elected in parliament and we will say, well, let's do it by qualified majority, and the council right away say, yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
This is a long-term, or at least a mid-long-term range goal where you have to work towards, and you have to build consensus and stuff like that.
You have described us all the goals which the party wants to achieve, and I would expect you to be very busy in your everyday life, especially when the elections are coming up. Can you describe how the everyday day in your life looks like?
Now we're in full campaign mode, so now it's really busy. We all do this on a voluntary basis, so no one is being paid to do this, which makes it a bit more difficult, I think. Before, most people like myself were doing this besides their work or their studies or things like that. The last 2 weeks, 2 months before the elections, a lot of people, including myself, took some time off from work to work full-time on Volt. Which means we have some more time, but since it's so busy, we're still working from 7 in the morning till 11, 12 at night. And we're doing all kinds of things. So we worked on producing our video for TV commercials, on radio commercials. We did the vote match things where you have to decide which position you take and write statements. We have people working on PR, talking to journalists. People are doing debates. We're coordinating that. We're recording some things today. It's crazy. We're doing all sorts of things. But that's what really makes it a lot of fun, because it is very stressful at the moment. But it's really fun to do because you see everyone is enthusiastic. Everyone is full of energy. And we're doing all kinds of new and interesting things.
Our social media campaign focuses on the political participation in connection with the European Union elections, with the European Parliament elections. Could you give a kind of recommendation for the youth? Why is it important to vote? Why is it important to participate? Why is it important to be interested in the EU and its institutions?
Yeah, of course. The European Union is, for a lot of people it seems very far away, and like it's doing things we don't really need or notice in our everyday lives. But they talk about fundamental issues that we all have a strong opinion about, things like climate change, things like migration, our economic situation, trade agreements with the United States or Canada. These are fundamental things that are really important and that most people have a strong opinion about. And if you have an opinion about this, you should speak out. So go vote. Vote for Volt. That's a really nice thing. We have a lot of good points, but even if you don't want to vote for us, at least go vote, because it only works if everyone speaks out. And you see that happening in things like Brexit. A lot of people don't go and they feel regret afterwards. It's just best to inform yourself, to read, to see who you agree with, and then just say what you want.
How are you different from the other national Dutch parties? Because you mentioned a couple of points on which your position is kind of similar.
Well, first of all, we are a European party. We're the first real European party, where they are focused nationally, we are focused on the European scale. So while we might have overlap in some positions, we're the only ones who have the same program all over Europe. So we're running in 8 countries in Europe this time. We want to run in all 28 next time. And in all those countries we have the exact same political program. So when we go to Brussels, the representatives from Volt Germany, and Volt Bulgaria, and Volt Spain, and Volt Netherlands will already have the same program. So you know exactly what you're voting on. If you vote for national parties, they will come together in European groups where they will negotiate for a common program and approach. And that is a weird thing in most cases, because D66, who is very pro-European and is showing more pro-European sounds now, is in the same group as VVD, who is not always on the same line with them. Then you have more extreme examples like CDA is in the same group with Orban. I think most people in the Netherlands would not agree with the points of view Orban has. And we don't have this, so we are very different in this respect that we are a European party.
Well, thank you so much for coming here, for giving us an interview. It was really great having you here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.